This episode, we are joined by Leonard Bad Boy Garcia of Ultimate Fighter fame.
Very first time they asked me and him to go hunting, we accepted. We're excited, we're happy.
And Ben Brochu from Hinterland Outdoors.
Yeah, it was actually a pretty hard hunt. The weather was just unseasonably warm.
We talk all things moose hunting, getting into hunting in general, and some pretty cool stories. Stay tuned.
Wild Talk is brought to you by Trapper Gourds and Wild TV Plus.
All right, everybody, welcome back to another exciting episode of Wild Talk. I'm your host, Steve Hamilton. I'm joined, as always, by my partner in crime, Kaylee Clausen. How's it going, Kaylee?
Good. How are you, Steve?
Pretty good. We're mid-November, almost end of November now, and I don't want to say that C word is coming up, but Christmas is here in the next month or so. I got some snow tires put on today, so yeah, it's predator hunting time. And speaking of hunting, you've got a story to tell from your mule deer hunt, don't you?
I do. I had some wicked success when we were down in southern Alberta. I was lucky enough. I had waited 2 years for this draw, and we filled the tag. We probably put on about 30 kilometers in 2 days. I got him in the second day, but first day it was hard, I guess. The archery hunters had pushed all the mule deer around, so we had to walk far on these landowners' property. And first day it didn't work out. We seen a very decent one. He got spooked out by a herd of cattle. And second day we were wandering about, we were probably 7 kilometers back onto another property, different area. And we spotted a couple bucks bedded, and we made the stalk on him. I got him right away at about 200 yards, and he went down perfectly, and it was a wicked hunt. I was blessed with success, and I could not complain.
You sure were. That I could hear the excitement in your voice when you texted me with that picture. And that was a heck of a deer. That was your first mule deer, wasn't it?
It was, yes. I've gone on several mule deer trips, but only for archery, and I've never ended up having my own. So this was the year, and I will not complain. I was very happy with them.
That is so epic. Congrats again, my friend. Speaking of first animals and being excited, we are joined today by former UFC fighter Leonard Bad Boy Garcia. And I've been a fan of his for as long as I can remember, going back, 15 some odd years ago when I saw him first fight on the TV show there. And I'd like to just say a huge thanks for joining us, Leonard. Welcome to the show.
Thank you guys for having me. So it means a lot.
As I said when I was texting you, I might fangirl a little bit, and I'm sure you're used to it.
I still blush, so.
Oh, it was crazy. I texted the group and I said, "Oh my God," he said, "Yeah, he's been quite nice about it." So I gotta send a huge thanks to our mutual friend Ben for hooking this connection up. I saw a post that he made the other day, a couple of weeks ago now, of you coming back from a hunt. I'm like, "Hey, can you see if you can make this connection work for us?" And here we are, and I finally get to chat with you. Like, four UFC fights of the night, a crazy banger with the Korean zombie, man. It's just, and now we've got you face to face here on the show. So
heck yeah, man. Well, I'm excited.
Oh, so for those that don't know, clearly I know a bit about you. Can you give us a little bit of a background on who you are and where you're from?
So my name is Leonard Garcia from Plainview, Texas. So I was born and raised in a little country town here in Texas. Thought football was going to be, I thought I was going to play in the NFL. I went to college and found out that Division I football needs bigger people. So then focused my attention on Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu and mixed martial arts, and ended up in the UFC from 2006 to 2014, and then had a lot of great fights, and then came back out of retirement in 2019 and did bare knuckle boxing for 19, 20, and 21. And so I retired as the number one middleweight in bare knuckle 2 years ago, and I'm glad it's all behind me now.
I can only imagine. I tried boxing when I was in my late teens, and I think it was Mike Tyson that said everybody's got a plan until you get punched in the mouth, and that took all plans of boxing right out of my
Yeah,
thought process.
yeah. I decided I can still count to 10, and I can still see straight. So I think right now is the time to retire.
You're
Good
doing good.
choice.
Thank
Absolute
you, guys.
great choice. So where's home for you right now?
Plainview, Texas. I moved back home. I was living in Edgewood, New Mexico, with Cowboy Cerrone out on the ranch for 7 years of my life, and that was enough of Cowboy for me. Being roommates with him, and decided to move back home. Got married, moved home, had some kids, and now I'm just retired. I own a business now here in Texas, and I'm starting to become some I guess some would call him pretty avid hunter. So it's getting interesting now.
We'll be right back with more from Leonard Garcia after these messages.
I own a business now here in Texas, and I'm starting to become some I guess some would call him pretty avid hunter. So it's getting interesting now.
I want to know the backstory on you. Did you grow up around hunting?
Well, yeah. So I was born and raised on a ranch. We raised our livestock, put them down when it was time for food. So to me, hunting was not hunting. Hunting was, I mean, it was like survival, right? So as a kid, I grew up and I was just used to, you watch an animal, born, you kind of fatten him up. And then when it's time for him to go, he goes. Um, didn't really get into hunting until I met Cowboy. Cowboy is a marksman. He loves shooting guns. We had 55 acres out there on the ranch, and we created our own shooting range. We would shoot things that we shouldn't be shooting, but we'd shoot them anyways. So here's a funny story. Very first time they asked me and him to go hunting, we accepted. We're excited. We're happy. Man, we're going to go. We're going to get flown down to Corpus Christi, hunt this big ranch. And we get out there, and they load us up early in the morning. They take us out to a blind. They sit us both up there, and we got our guide, who is our host, sitting in the blind with us. And we hear the feeders go off, and then 45 minutes later, they come up, and he's like being real quiet, like, "Hey, go ahead, take your shot." And I'm looking at Cowboy. Cowboy's looking at me, and he was like, "Who's he talking to?" And I was like, "I don't." He's like, "Go ahead, take the shot." And then I'm like, "What?" I mean, he came to eat. And then where we're sitting up at an elevated range, looking down. And I guess he said that was like an area where he took us where it was a guaranteed, like you were guaranteed to make the shot. So he would take all his, big game guys up there to get a good shot at an exotic animal or whatever. Me nor Cowboy wanted to take a shot. So he pulls us off the blind. You can tell he's visibly upset. And he was like, "What's wrong?" And we were both expressed to him, we thought we were going to track it, hunt it, go look for it, search for it, maybe do some walking, running, sneak up on it. We didn't know. So then he was like, "Well, we got a lot of hogs out here. You want to go eradicating?" And that's what we did out on that ranch. We went out and we shot quite a few hogs. I can't remember how many it was. Cowboy embellished the story and say we got 50 of them. But I'm not sure how many we actually got. Well, we did get a lot of them, and that was more fun to us. So when we started, doing other things, like we went coyote hunting here in Texas, where you'd get on the back of the truck. They had great greyhound looking dogs. They'd let the dogs go chase them down, and then we would get them. We did that a couple of times, and this moose hunt came up, and they were kind of telling me, we can't bait them. We can't, do anything. You have to track them. You have to, go and find where they are. If we go during the rut, we can call them in. But if we go after the rut, it's a little more difficult because we have to find where they're eating. We have to kind of study them a little bit and understand. That sounded challenging to me. So I was like, well, I'm all in, man. Let's go. So we went there, and I got lucky. We drew who our guides were going to be, and I drew Ben. That was probably the best thing that could have happened. We ended up, we're bunking at the same place. So we would spend, preparing. We'd spend the night preparing, like, hey, this is what we're going to do tomorrow. We're going to get up. We're going to do this. We're going to go out to this once. We would lay the whole game plan out, and then we would see it through. Well, our very first day that we went out, I spotted some, it looked like, like a cow to me because I'm from Texas. And I was like, I think I seen something. So he backs up and we look out, and he gets, his rangefinder, and he looks, and he was like, oh my God, you spotted one. So we go, we get close enough not to scare them because I didn't understand their sense of smell, and their hearing is phenomenal, right? Like he says, when you make a call, they hear it from miles away, and then they come to you. So he was like, you can imagine now that they're more relaxed. They're not in the rut. They're just kind of relaxing, eating food. All they're listening for is some trying to sneak up on them or, anything else. So we get to a point where I think I can make a shot, and we're getting close to making a shot. He starts looking at this map, and he was like, hold on. We don't have permission on this land.
Oh, wow.
And I was like, oh, it's right there. Like, right. I'm from Texas, the Wild West guy. I've got him in my scope. I want to take a shot. He's like, don't take a shot. So let me get permission. So we trek back to the truck, go down to the landowner. We ask for permission. We come back. They're gone. Like everything is gone. We go up to the spot where they were. There was still moose droppings right there. They were still warm. So, there's no snow at this time. And normally there's snow. So we couldn't track them. And then, Wednesday came. The weather wasn't cooperating with us. Thursday came. It was foggy. Friday came. It was foggy. So Saturday was the last day that we could make, of the hunt.
We'll be right back with more from Leonard Garcia after these messages.
Wednesday came. The weather wasn't cooperating with us. Thursday came. It was foggy. Friday came. It was foggy. So Saturday was the last day that we could make, of the hunt. So we get out there and we're searching high and low from morning to night. Till I think it was 45 minutes till I couldn't take a legal shot anymore. So it was 4:45 and 5:30 that was it. Like my hunt was over. And we're all looking one direction, and I don't know what it was. I turned around and I started looking off into the distance, and then I spot something, and I was like, Ben, is that something there? He turns around, he gets on the binoculars. He was like, that's a bull. His voice changed everything. He was like, let's go. So we jump in the truck. We come up on it. We spot him again. We drive, I don't know how many. He said I spotted him from a mile and a half away. So we drive all the way over. There's a bush line that you can tell that's where he was at. So Ben comes around the bush. We try to sneak up to him through the bush. And he heard us, but this guy was smart. He waited for us to come out of the bush on this side, and he went into the bush on that side and then cut all the way through it. So when he told me, get back to the truck now, we're running through the bush. I'm running with my gun and trying to make it through. And when we come out on the other side, we see him cooking the other direction. And he gets me within, I can't remember, I think it was 90 yards. And by the time I took a shot, he was 190 yards away. And he dropped straight down on his head. And he was like, you are a fighter. You dropped him with one shot. but it was so exhilarating. Like I put so much pressure on myself that I had to come home with the moose. I told my wife and kids that I would feel like a failure if I didn't come home. So when I dropped, like I shot and he was like, "You got him." I dropped my gun right there, ran to the truck and FaceTime like a little kid. I started FaceTiming my wife and Ben's out in the middle of the field, like, what is this guy doing? Picks up my gun, takes it over to me, and then we go and we find him right where I'd hit him. He dropped. You could see everything. And then he was still kind of alive. So I had to give him one more to take him out of his misery. But the way Ben adapted to my style of what I wanted to do and took his expertise and put me on bulls, put me on different situations, even in the fog. He was finding tracks, he was finding things. It made the experience so much better that I had a great guide. Without throwing any of the other guides under the bus, we had one guy who went and never saw one, didn't see anything, and he was definitely stuck on his style of hunting. And I was grateful that I had Ben who listened to me, what I wanted to do, kind of made the experience all the way through every day. It was like I was the one hunting. He wasn't like, "Hey, I'm going to put you on one. You're going to go find it." He understood what I wanted to do. I wanted to learn to track them. I wanted to learn this. So he was looking for prints. He was looking for different things that I could, kind of put myself into it. And he did a great job. And, now, whenever I go hunting, I'm going to ask Ben for his advice on every one. So we seen a mule deer. So she was talking about a mule. We seen one out there and it was massive. It was a nice one. And I told him, I was like, "Man, I'd like to get that." And he was like, "Well, there's a tag coming up. I think I could find you one." So we're in pretty decent contact now, and I'm hooked. I have to go back. I have to go back to Alberta and I have to hunt. He keeps telling me about black bears, and he was like, "Dude, it would look so cool. Like your moose head, your black bear, your mule deer. You'd have a bunch of trophies." And now, I'm all in on it. Like that's all I'm thinking about.
I can relate to that, man. I really can. Black bear is my jam. Here in British Columbia, it's completely different sort of approach to a hunt there. And in Alberta, Kaylee, correct me if I'm wrong, but a lot of the black bear hunting there is over bait in
Yep,
hands, right?
absolutely. It's either bait or spot and stock.
Yeah, here we can't bait black bears.
Wow. Yeah. So something cool when we're sighting our guns in, he said, "Hey, have you ever seen a black bear in the wild?" And I was like, "No." And he's like, look over to your right. There's a black bear just sitting there. I mean, he was far enough from us where we weren't in any danger, but it was just there. Looked like, I zoom in with my camera and I was like, "Oh my God, that's a bear." He was like, "I just told you. Have you ever seen a black bear in the wild?" And we laughed. And we're shooting our guns, and this bear is like minding his own business, didn't care what we were doing. He was just kind of out. I was shocked because I thought all bears were hibernating during that time. So I told him, I didn't think we were going to see any bear, and he was like, "Oh yeah, some of them, if they're hungry, they come out and kind of." I don't know what they're doing, but that one was just kind of hanging out there while we were sighting in our guns, and he didn't. I mean, we didn't bother him one bit.
We'll be right back with more from Leonard Garcia after these messages.
So I told him, I didn't think we were going to see any bear, and he was like, "Oh yeah, some of them, if they're hungry, they come out and kind of." I don't know what they're doing, but that one was just kind of hanging out there while we were sighting in our guns, and he didn't. I mean, we didn't bother him one bit.
The black bears are amazing. Here in BC, we've got, I think the last estimate was done 12, 13 years ago. They figure about 160,000 black bears here in BC.
Wow.
We got the most in North America here. And I grew up in a big city, Vancouver.
Okay.
And moved to Prince George about 17 years ago now to a small, I'll call it a small town of about 70,000. So quite the difference from a million population, 70,000. And
Yeah.
I got into hunting pretty heavily when I moved up here. I kind of dabbled in it a little bit. I went out with relatives when I was a kid, never took anything. And like I said, when I got into it up here, I fell in love with the black bear hunt, and that's a staple of meat in our freezer. And I did a post a few years ago on Facebook and talked about hunting a black bear, and I got a message from a very good friend of mine that I'd known since kindergarten, so over 40 years now. And
Ah,
I got the is black bear edible question, and it was okay, this can go one of two ways. This is either going to go very good or very bad. So in a nutshell, now he has his British Columbia hunting license. He's got 4 black bears to his name. He comes up every year now, and he
wow.
absolutely fell in love with the hunt. And we can see in the peak of the bear rut, which is usually early June-ish here,
Okay.
we can see, no word of a lie, 30 bears in a day,
Wow.
easy. So
So you got me hooked already because you said it could go really good or really bad. That's like, that's the exhilaration. That's what, like, having a feeder and letting them just come out to the feeder doesn't do anything for me. It doesn't, it kind of feels like I'm cheating, right? But I guess with the bear, if you're baiting them to get close to you, you're right. It can go really good or really bad. So that would be an exhilarating hunt.
oh, black bears, yeah, we'll definitely chat about that. But the other one, like I mentioned at the beginning of the show, is predator hunting. And you talked about coyotes, and there was a picture you held up of a coyote, and that can be a pretty emotive hunt for a lot of people because, as you know, a lot of people don't really understand how predator hunting is a necessary part of wildlife management. So, was that something you kind of understood going into? You said you were doing it with cowboy.
Yeah. So I very first thing when I spotted him, I said, "Hey, there's a coyote. Are they a nuisance out here the way they are in Texas?" And he was like, "Absolutely." I said, "Yeah, will you let me do some target practice?" He said, "Get off." So I jumped off, and I actually got him at 240 yards. So that was like because I told him, I said, this is the first time with this gun. I wanted, I worked on sighting it in there at the area that we are shooting at, but the sights were only like 40, 50 yards away. So I was really worried about my drop in the range. So I wanted to take some shots kind of far out. And that was a great opportunity for it. And he was like, "Yeah, if I put this guy on a moose, he's going to hit it." And it was good for both of us, right? He got to see that I was going to be able to make a shot under pressure, and that it could be far away, and I'd still hit it. One of the biggest things I didn't want to do is injure an animal and leave it out there. So that's why I was so focused on making sure I was sighted in, and that coyote just came at the right time, gave me an opportunity, and we got him.
Oh, it's so critical, as you know, to know your firearm out there, and to know who you're hunting with. It's not an easy thing to jump off an airplane or off a truck or whatever and be partnered up with somebody who essentially you're trusting your life to them and their life to you. They're hanging out with a firearm, right? So
And
it's
also with Ben, I was impressed by his ability when he found out I was going to be his guy, his connection, the questions he asked me. He kind of, asked, I felt like it was psychological questions, like I'm going to be walking behind this guy with the gun. I was impressed by the questions he asked. He never made me feel uncomfortable, made me very comfortable with him. And you're right. I mean, you're going out into the wilderness with a complete stranger that you met, hours before you're out there with the gun. And it was really good. Like I really feel like this was his professional calling in life because I mean he really did make the hunt what it was. The experience was more with Ben than actually just getting the animal, but the fact that he was able to put me on an animal and was able to go to the very last minute meant a lot to me. And I knew I knew when I was taking the shot, I can't miss. like he put himself on the line. I put myself out here. I've got to get this animal. And when we did, other than dropping my gun and going back to the truck and celebrating, I think, that was the one thing I did incorrectly. But he was so excited. I was so excited. I mean, we hugged like two men should never hug in the wilderness. But it was that great. It was a lot of fun, and I recommend him on any hunts.
We'll be right back with more from Leonard Garcia after these messages.
Like he put himself on the line. I put myself out here. I've got to get this animal. And when we did, other than dropping my gun and going back to the truck and celebrating, I think, that was the one thing I did incorrectly. But he was so excited. I was so excited. I mean, we hugged like two men should never hug in the wilderness. But it was that great. It was a lot of fun, and I recommend him on any hunts.
Oh, he's such a great guy, and you nailed it there with the emotions. You with hunting, you start high, you go low, you go high, you go low, and you'll have that rush of adrenaline when you're like, oh, there's a legal animal out there, and you do everything in your power to steady your nerves. You take those breaths, and you go from a high to an absolute low, in my opinion, in my experience. But you pull the trigger, you're consciously taking a life. And that's not an easy thing to do for a lot of people. So you go up, down, and you're all over the map. So I get it with the emotion there and being excited, because
he did. He asked me, was this like winning a fight? And I was like, it's so crazy that you said that, because I had that endorphin rush, like you said. I'm jumping off the truck. I'm taking everything moment by moment, just like a fight. Like, in the fight, you're in it, and everybody sees all this chaos going on. But I know exactly what I have to do, when I have to do it. And it's like you're making split seconds decisions. And I remember watching this thing through the scope, and I'm like, okay, I'm going to get him. I'm going to get him. How much do I lead him? How far is he going to go? And then when I took the shot, I reloaded and I looked, and he was like, you got him. And I mean, the excitement when he told me I got him, I was just so excited. Like I said, I remember jumping up, and the first thing I thought was, I got to let everybody know, and I run back to the truck. And it was so funny how, like you said, all the highs and the lows, how it all came down to that one shot. And when you got the animal, I remember I went over there, and I'm like picking his head up, kind of petting him, like, and being respectful to him as well. Like, it was surreal. It was just like a great feeling. I think people who are against hunting don't understand these things. And I think they should really look into it and see why we do it. I mean, we're eating the meat, we're bringing the head home. And I don't know if, it's the same as showing your championship belt, but I get it now.
That's what I wanted to ask about. Was there any parallels that you could draw between being a hunter in the field and hearing that door of the cage slam behind you?
Yeah.
That you kind of answered it there. So you're a relatively new hunter, we could say. You got into it in your adult, same as I did. So
yeah,
what would you say to someone who's wanting to get into hunting?
So, I mean, first, with anything and everything that I do, I try to prepare, right? I watch hunting videos. I watch videos of guys talking about the hunt, kind of like shows like this, where there's people explaining the exhilaration behind it, the feeling that they got. And if that's something you seek, that, those feelings that if we could bottle them, we'd make billions of dollars. This is one of them. You know what I mean? It's like a feeling of, like you said, highs and lows. And you look at life in general, right? Life is full of highs and lows. You got to learn to mitigate the losses and expect more from the wins. But it's crazy because when you win, you don't learn anything, right? You're kind of like, I won. That's it. I did good. But when you lose, what does everybody say? Let's go back to the drawing board. So it's like every day on the hunt, like I spotted one and didn't get a shot, I went back to the drawing board. Next day, we didn't see anything. Back to the drawing board. So it was like as all those little losses became lessons. Okay, okay, okay. And then finally, when I was able to get the shot and get it and get that big win at the end, it like the whole story came full circle. And anybody who's out there that's seeking like I said, a feeling that unexplainable to, because I'm sure every person would have a different feeling. Man, I encourage you guys, go out, get a good guide, and figure it out for yourself. Go out there and do it. And he's told me he's had people who go out there and can't take a shot. And like I don't know. I would say, if they would have taken the shot, maybe it would have took them down to another place. But the fact that they didn't take a shot, but they went on the hunt, maybe that taught them something that they needed. And to me, it's a journey, man. You kind of go out there, you do it, you get from it what it's going to give to you, and that's going to be what it is for you. Like everybody's experience is different, and I feel like mine won't be like anybody else's, and that's what makes it special.
So Leonard, I would just want to thank you again from everybody here at Wild Talk for making some time for us, and we can't wait to chat with you again about your next hunt. So yeah,
Absolutely,
thanks
man.
again.
Thank you guys for having me. It means a lot to be recognized for the things I've done in the past. I enjoy your guys' show. I think anybody who's out there and wants to learn more about hunting, watch this show on some of the guests on there and go get your own feeling.
Awesome. Thanks again, brother.
Thank you guys. Y'all have a great evening.
And we are back with more Wild Talk. We're joined by Ben Brochu on this segment. Ben just guided UFC legend Leonard Garcia on a moose hunt. We just heard from Leonard the last segment, so let's hear from Ben. Ben, welcome to Wild Talk.
Thanks for having me, Steve.
So Ben, let's just dive with both feet right into this hunt. How did it come about?
So when I was 16 years old, I started baiting for an outfitter who was my English teacher. And then just recently, I decided to go guiding full time. And so I was just signed up to guide for a moose hunt, honestly. And then arrived there and met a bunch of real neat guys. And one of them, his ears looked a little off. And I was just feeling like, there's something about this guy. I've seen this before. And sure enough, Leonard was a fighter, and I got to know him really well over the week. And we had a great time.
Oh, when I saw the pictures on your social media, I told Len on the last segment that I fanboyed over him, fangirled, whatever you want to call it. And you didn't even know who he was when I reached out to you. You said, "Oh yeah, found out he was a fighter because I noticed his cauliflower ears," and that made me laugh. So he got a pretty good moose, I would say, especially for a first timer. So how did that hunt look? There was pretty cool stories he got into. I'd like to hear from your point of view.
Yeah, it was actually a pretty hard hunt. The weather was just unseasonably warm for November. We've had a terrible November. I've been guiding all November, and I've never had to work hard for moose like we did this year. His hunt was a dual tag zone. So one of the zones was farmland, one was the deep bush. And we got to do a little bit of each with him. But this was Leonard's. He had hunted, I think, a hog before, but he was a pretty new hunter. And so we did a lot of teaching as we went and, showing him different tracks, showing him what the moose calls were like, even though we were a little bit late on the calling. But it was just a wonderful experience from beginning to end. So he had a couple opportunities on moose earlier on, and the last one all came together. It was actually the last day of the hunt, and he performed well under pressure. So it was pretty cool to see.
Oh yeah, he definitely had high praises for you and the hunt itself. I asked him how it went, and I think he just went for about 15 minutes talking about the experiences, yeah, and the nuances and how much he learned from you. So it was a great experience. What area of Alberta was this hunt in?
Yeah, so this was with Plea Hall Frank Lake Guiding Outfitting. So this is the area I grew up near Donnelly in northern Alberta. The lodge is just outside of Donnelly, Alberta, kind of north, about an hour and a half from where I live in DeBolt. And so I know the area very well. So I guided for bears in there. I did all the baiting from when I was 16 and then guided since I was 18. So this is my old stomping grounds. I grew up in that area. And it was also good. A lot of the farmers there are supportive of the hunting, and so we got to do some farmland, some bush hunting. He got his bull in the farmland, and so it's a different ball game to just a different style of hunting. We saw lots of moose. Some days we saw 15 moose, but we were looking for a bull, and we were looking for one that was ready to stand there for Leonard to get set up, and it worked out wonderful.
Oh, it absolutely looked like it did. Yeah, farmland is not something we have too much of here in where I am in northern British Columbia area near Prince George. At least not accessible to hunters. It's a totally different ball game from looking at people's social media for those that are chasing any animals pretty much from the Rockies east. So you talked about seeing 15 moose in one day. Is that a normal sort of density for Alberta?
I would say we're covering ground on those hunts just because of the weather that we had. If the weather was cold and they're active and moving, they'd be in the cut blocks in the bush, or we could be early season, we'd be calling them in. Um, it is a good moose density, and moose numbers are actually doing well. I think it's partially due to increased wolf harvests in that area. There's some of the bush areas are actually a little bit hurting for the moose. A lot of that area that we hunt in there burned this spring. Just a tremendous amount of acres burned up, as you know, and it'll actually be good for the moose hunting probably in a couple of years, but it wasn't good this year, and so it's not unusual in the rut. Like I took Annika, my daughter, deer hunting for 45 minutes after work one day, and we saw 11 moose in 45 minutes, 5 bulls, or it was 12 moose, 12 or 13 actually. So it's possible. And I'm starting with where I know the moose live, right? But it is a good density of moose. It's a good year for moose.
Right. So you had to adapt your tactics from what you normally did, type thing. We had a guest on a couple episodes ago, and we talked about wildfires in British Columbia and Alberta. So yeah, it's no stranger to our show here what wildfire looks like and needs to look like on the landscape in order to improve habitat and moose and ungulate numbers, for example. So it's a different sort of hunt when you're hunting a post fire. It definitely is, isn't it?
100%. Yeah. And stuff moved around. We saw stuff that we never didn't usually see. Sometimes the muleys were in a different place than they used to be, or the whitetail, or the moose, or the elk. There definitely was some shifting. And some of the game that we saw this year is quite likely that they got shuffled around because of the fires.
We'll be right back with more Wild Talk after this.
We saw stuff that we never didn't usually see. Sometimes the muleys were in a different place than they used to be, or the whitetail, or the moose, or the elk. There definitely was some shifting. And some of the game that we saw this year is quite likely that they got shuffled around because of the fires.
And this will segue us perfectly into where I want to go with this next conversation. Is you talked about having your daughter out there, and I've followed you on social media for a few years now, and you're always promoting getting kids into the outdoors. Why is that so important to you?
If we don't invest in the next generation, no matter what it is, we just won't have it. If there's not people who are out there in the wilderness areas and the bush who have a passion and appreciation for wildlife, we're simply going to lose it because no people won't know what they're missing. I think there's been a huge disconnect from the land and just what on earth we're here for and what we're a part of and the role we can play in stewardship of that. And that's kind of been the biggest blessing for me of even doing the social media thing. I started out small with our sailing thing and it took off with the trapping, but there were so many people who just didn't even know. I had message after message of people who said, I had this idea of hunters or trappers or fishermen, and then all of a sudden it's become humanized, through the eyes of a child. And all of a sudden they're saying, how can I be a part of this? How can I go and harvest my own food? And that's been, it's worth a little bit of effort to share those stories.
I don't think I could have said that any better myself. You said it perfectly. It's about getting the next generation out there, or we're going to lose it. We see it so often on social media and in traditional media that hunters and firearms owners are, for lack of a better term, they're under attack. I don't think it's by anybody for the most part, willingly saying, hey, this is bad. I think there's a lot of misinformation out there. It's that disconnect, as you said, that kind of distances people from that true field to plate, knowing where their food came from. 100 years ago, our great grandparents, they were doing the very thing that we're trying to make socially acceptable now, and it was commonplace. Hell, 30 years ago, I remember seeing deer on the hood of vehicles and in the back of trucks, and you'd be at a gas station and you'd be giving each other high fives and talking about where you got it and what your next hunt looked like. Now you pull into a gas station, you need to kind of look around depending where you are and make sure that you're not having the police called on you.
I fueled up a few times this year with deer in the back and moved. In our areas, we still get more high fives and thumbs up than dirty looks, but there's definitely mixed reviews for sure.
It's almost disappointing how far we have come, for lack of a better term, in distancing ourselves. And people like yourself that put it out there, I don't want to say in your face, are doing a great job of making it a little more acceptable and bringing people closer to their food.
We'll be right back with more Wild Talk after this.
So before we wrap it up, I want to know, if you were to try and pick your favorite story to tell, whether it be sailing, guiding, trapping, fishing, anything, you got one in mind?
Oh, I don't know. It really depends what the topic is and who I'm telling, because I don't even really remember. Like, one of the things I like about guiding is you're meeting new people all the time and you're just explaining your way of life. And as you're talking about one thing, it'll remind you about something that you completely forgot about. Like, I'll forget some of the things that I've done. And that's why I started taking the pictures and stuff. Like, I started taking videos for my YouTube channel, really just to be able to show my kids. I did these packcraft trips, and that'll always stick with me. We went on, if you look up Wood River Expedition, we wanted to run a river that had never been run before. We've done a number of these since, but we kind of only knew enough to be dangerous. And we got into this, the headwaters of the Wood River. We had to hike into Fortress Lake, paddle the lake. And the long and short of it is we lost our boats. We punctured our boats. We lost our food. You know, it was supposed to be a 5-day trip. It took 11 days. And we ran into bears and we almost drowned and hypothermia and lost gear. And it was a formative thing to, it's interesting though that it took away any fear of running out of food. Like, I packed less backpacking than I did before because I know what it's like to go hungry, and I know I was fine. After a couple of days, you're burning fat. Like, I lost 13 pounds in the last 5 days, you know, and my knee was in bad shape. We ate blueberries and it was, but my friend Luke, and he bugs me about it, but I remember that as a positive trip. Like, we had good times on that trip. We had fun, we laughed, but we also stared death in the face. And when you do that, it takes away the edge of it because I know how I'm going to react when I'm staring right into the eyes of death. And, you know, if I wouldn't have caught one little branch at one point, I don't think it would have gone the same way because we were in a gorge where, you know, we had every possible dry bag, and the stuff that went through those gorges and canyons was destroyed and wet no matter what it was in. And it was inside of a airtight boat. It was airtight at one point.
I think that's an absolutely perfect way to end this segment with you, Ben. You stared death in the face. Nobody else has been able to do that trip since. So there's no better story we could tell on that. I think that was a great way to do it there, Ben. So thanks for joining us on Wild Talk. We'll chat soon.
Thanks for having me.
Wild Talk is brought to you by Trapper Gourds and Wild TV Plus.